I'm doing a PhD in nursing science at the University of Ottawa. But a long time ago, I mean, 20 years ago, I did a Master of Engineering too. So that's why I've got that kind of, technical view and sometimes IT view on things. And this is why I am doing that presentation, which is not related to what I am doing for my PhD, which is more focused on the causal modeling of some mental health diagnosis. Okay. So just to get started on that one, basically in 2018 in France, there was a change in the way people were admitted to higher education. And there was the use of a new algorithm, so called Parcoursup, that replaced another one. And there's a student that requested the source code of this algorithm, and that this way found out some things. So we will talk about that later. And that is the opening and the start of like a reflection I had at the time when people were talking about algorithms governing our lives, and politics were talking about them, about things that were not under their control. And at the time, it shocked me because I know this is not really true. At least it wasn't at the time. And an algorithm is something that humans do manage really well, and that one was created by humans, right? So the question is, when talking about code and algorithm, etc., in the society, so what does that code do, okay? And what is its relation to reality, to the social reality? Does it make it, or is it done by it, or is it both, or etc.? And in terms of critical realism, where does it fit with the general ontological layers? So that presentation, I will do a very short introduction on algorithms. So because we don't have 10 hours, I will talk about the French higher education selection history, because it's important to understand the way it works. I will explain, that algorithm through the critical realist eye, and then talk about more like methods and methodologies around the way it can help researchers, especially in social sciences. So algorithms, it's very simple. It's like like a recipe in the kitchen. It's a sequence of operations for a task. And laws can be seen as algorithm. So there's a situation which occurs, and does it meet the legal criteria? Yes or no? And if not, you are punished. You go to jail, or you are fined, or etc. So that's a set of rules. And it's not always simple to apply, especially with laws, but that's the way it works. A GPS can be seen. It's got algorithms in it, because you've got some data which is inputted, and then based on that, it's going to calculate some routes, etc. And that may change, if there is a change in the traffic data, for example. So that's very general things. And why it matters for sociology or social sciences or for whoever is that they don't just process data. There's in the way we interact with those rules, with those algorithms, they shape our lives everywhere. In dating apps, jobs, education, obviously, etc. So the French higher education selection is a bit different compared to a lot of countries, where after the 60s there was something where everybody could access most of the universities, basically when you completed a high school. So there was a massification of higher education, and then it brought quite a few problems in terms of managing resources to be able to provide this higher education. So at some point, they decided to limit the number of seats in the universities. And then there was, like in 2009, like a first algorithmic solution that used a well-known algorithm called Gale-Shapley, which, if it is applied properly, is probably something quite fair, but it wasn't fully applied properly. There was a crisis in 2017 because it didn't work as expected, and then they decided to implement like a more human-centered approach. At least it was the promise, called Parcoursup in 2018, and it is still the one that has been used since then, even if they modified it a bit. So that's not so. There was a paradox with that new solution, which is it was supposed to be human-centered to eliminate some form of randomness that was perceived by the population as being unfair. But at the end, it brought more complexity, not less, and it wasn't working as expecting, with a lot of people, not being able to access higher education because of the issues that went with it. So from the critical realist point of view, so I did split it, with the stratified ontology. So I would put this type of software algorithm in the actual domain. I mean, that can be debated, but I see that as a form of intermediate layer that does encode the reality. So the reality could be seen as the law here, but I think I would see it more like like the true values that there is in the society, the things like social reproduction mechanisms or social hierarchies or things like that, that do actually that are encoded, whether like transparently or not, into some source code or laws, which interact with each other, because the algorithm is supposed to implement the laws, and then that brings some observable results or events in life. Things like like more fairness and social equality and access to higher education for whoever, in a fair way, not based on how much your parents earn or things like that. So some form of ideal meritocratic aspect of things. And this is why, because it is here in this actual domain, I think it makes sense for critical realists to study code, to actually get insight on the causal mechanisms at play in the society between the layers of reality. So those algorithms, because of what they do, they have a generative causal powers, as I was mentioning it. It's not only something very like just a tool, very basic, doing something. It actually generates some reality, some effects in the society, because it does encode like some geographic quotas, for example, in France, some form of merit calculations, whatever its definition is in this case, and there was a form of ranking opacity, etc. So so a lot of things bringing some form of reality for people. So that brings that the question of the methods to use for us, or even people who are not critical realists. How do you deal with that material evidence of like dealing with reality? So this is what a student did in 2018. He requested the source code of the algorithm, and there was a court which ordered it, because in France, any form of code which is produced by the government is supposed to be, it's anybody asking for it is supposed to get it, unless it's something specific in some conditions. But in that case, a court did decide that it was possible to communicate, and that students, that engineering students, had a look at it, and basically between the promise of the full transparency and rules that would be fair, what he did see is in reality there were like rules that could be applied at the local level that were not matching the promises, and basically there was some kind of social segregation taking place, by leveraging the algorithm, and the design of the algorithm did allow that. So it wasn't the thing promised at first. So, well, basically, I've just said that whole. I'm trying to be quick, otherwise it will be 2 hours. I am halfway here. So the important thing is that it did reveal the hidden layers where the institutions, in a very opaque way, could decide on some criteria that were not upfront, and that students were not able to know and to basically base that decision based on them. Even the year after that, there was a lawsuit asking for, like the criteria for the decisions by the university, and the laws stated that, I mean, the court ruled that basically it was protected by secrecy. So something that was supposed to be very transparent, and part of the algorithm was, at the end, because of that secrecy, people were not able to know what the real rules to make decisions, what they were. So there were those local algorithms which were not standardized. So the code, when you can have it in a way or another, it can be used, like for retroductive code analysis within CR. And this is why I call that digital excavation approach, where the source code is a material that can be studied, and within our stratified analysis, what I presented earlier, well, basically, if we don't want to have black boxes, and we have black boxes most of the time in the society, we all have a computer in front of us, and they are black boxes. Nobody knows really what they do, and every time somebody finds out, try to study, some data flowing from your machine, they find out that Microsoft is taking some data without your consent, etc. So you have no control over that unless you use a Linux system or something like that, which I actually do just now. And I see, code as a source of data to analyze the society, which is not something which is done very often, I think, to date. And it's a source of data which is very relevant, because it does actually encode what is going on in the world. And very often politics are going to have a discourse on things and say, we do this, we do that. But when you have a look at the reality behind it, it is encoded in some algorithms. And here with this one, it is a good opportunity to do that. So the problem is, like most of the social scientists, very often I find are not so familiar with that. So in terms of methods, I think it makes sense to work with other disciplines and people, find some, what I call that, technical partnerships, to collaborate with computer scientists, to be able to match basically some discipline domain that somebody in sociology or nursing science may have, but without the skills to have a look at the code and to study it. So I think there's like an opportunity to work between disciplines to be able to study those algorithms in the society. And what I put here, well, I don't know if anybody of you use large language models for this type of purpose, but I was trying to bring an example yesterday of that. But I was trying to use a large language model with using like prompt engineering, and by inputting the codes to be able to make it study it, to have a look at it, and to see if I could get some form of insights that would help me to understand the code, and if it was able to detect the patterns within it. So prompt engineering is definitely a path, along with obviously domain expertise and technical partnerships. And if one is able to do that, I think, and if we have access to the code, there is an opportunity to be able to study all the layers and those mechanisms. So some other examples outside of that area, credit scores. Here in Canada, there are credit scores which have an impact on the reality of who can, buy a house or not buy a house, and where, etc. And I was trying to have a look to find what those algorithms are, and there's no way to get them. In criminal justice, there are some algorithms. I forgot the name of them, but in the US, where they calculate the probability of people to commit a crime again based on some criteria. All those are algorithms that would deserve to be looked at from a critical realist viewpoint too. So that's just a few ideas of things that could be studied. So in conclusion, I am on time. As I said, like a code, like the algorithms and the code basically do embed some form of realities, and they are like a form of raw data for anybody who wants to have a look at the reality of the social world, and to get insight on the underlying mechanisms. Beyond, the discourse or even the laws, between the law and the algorithm, the code, there may be some gaps too. And this Parcoursup demonstrates that, and exactly because there was a gap between the political discourse about it, the law, and then at the end, the way it was being applied in the real life. And there's a real opportunity for a form of digital archaeology, to work between different disciplines to be able to analyze those things and to get an insight on the relation between the ontological layers. And to open to the what's coming next. There is currently a shift from like a theory-driven algorithmic approach, like the one, you have a law and you do encode it into an algorithm. But now, and I believe the other people in the panel are going to talk about that. We are shifting to a data-first approach with machine learning, which is something very different in a way, because the algorithm and the decisions made by it are going probably to be made based on data, as opposed to based on a form of theory and something that politics and laws are trying to encode. So even if today, from a historical perspective and what is going on today at the present, that may not be so relevant, with a more data-first approach. And that was it.
Vincent, this was a wonderful presentation. You rehearsed this very well because like it's 20 minutes exactly. So nicely done. Thank you very much for this very insightful.
First time of my life, I am on time.
So I think the next one is Anjay. Are you ready to hook your presentation? And let's give Anjay maybe just a few minutes to make sure everything is okay.
I tu będę widział na komputerze, tak? I tutaj. Dobrze. No, ladies and gentlemen. Tak będzie lepiej. So, okay, the title of presentation is przedłużę, tym przerzucam, przepraszam. Tak. Cofnę. Sorry, one moment. Przepraszam, nie mogę tego zobaczyć. Już, tak? I tym następne, tak? Jeszcze raz.
Tak, muszę okienko przeklikać.
Czyli tym, tak?
Tu jest następny, a to jest poprzedni.
Aha, tym następny. Okay. So, I'm sorry about it. So the title of your presentation is Artificial Intelligence, a Chance or a Threat to Human Creativity. No co to widzę, to się zmienia? O, sorry, znowu mam ten sam problem. Tym, tak? Dobrze. Okay. In the age of rapid technological advancement, artificial intelligence has become an increasingly powerful tool in various areas of human activity, including the creative industries. And this presentation will explore the dual nature of AI as both a support mechanism and potential threat to human creativity. Special attention will be given to issues on intellectual property rights, which are being challenged by the growing presence of generated content. It will be all in my article. Here is only the short presentation. Still have troubles. Oh, bardzo proszę. Okay, next one. So artificial intelligence is increasingly intertwined with human creativity in fields ranging from visual arts, painting, for instance, and music, to literature, film, and design. This theoretical analysis explores AI's dual role both as a catalyst for a creative enhancement and a potential threat to human creators. On one hand, generative AI tools have augmented artistic productivity and opened novel creative avenues, extending human imagination in unprecedented ways. On the other hand, AI's capacity to autonomously generate high-quality images, text, music, and video has raised some alarms about the displacement of human artists and the homogenization of the creative output. So the author examined how AI-driven content creation challenge established notion of intellectual property rights, authorship, ownership, and accountability. Next one, please. The presentation synthesis current literature and case studies to contrast scenarios where AI acts as a collaborative tool for human creative versus instances where AI effectively replaces them. Ethical and cultural tensions are highlighted, including concerns over originality, authenticity, and the erosion of artistic livelihoods. I also review legal developments from copyright lawsuits and policy proposals to the no guidance in the arts that graduates AI impact of creative industries. Ultimately ensuring a human-centric approach to AI in the arts is very crucial on that harness AI's generative power to support human creativity and cultural diversity, while safeguarding the rights and role of human creators. And very important here is the balance. This balance will determine whether AI serves as a partner in creative evolution or a disruptive force that undermines the very creativity that inspired it. That's one. So defining creativity in the age of AI. Scholars, especially those first definition of Stein, if 1950 said, define creativity as a generation of work that both is novel, so first novelty, and valuable, usefulness. This dual criterion, originality coupled with meaningfulness, provides a yardstick for evaluating both human and AI generative creation. Human creativity has long been studied in fields like psychology, for instance, psychology creativity, and art theory. But the emergence of computational creativity research, this in the cards, had extended this question to machines. Early AI systems, regarding music, were quite rudimentary, but they prompted theoretical debates of whether a machine could truly be creative, as man could be. Yes. So many theorists resolved that AI could be a tool, and only a tool, for augmented human creativity, rather than independent creative agent. For instance, artificial intelligence has not feelings or human experience. For example, in poetry or literature, it could be very useful in technical skills, but not the most human ideas. Please, the next one. Next one, please. Oh, yes. Okay. And the research provides insight into AI's complex on creativity. First of all, was very interesting experiment Dolphin-Hauser from 2024. They conducted an experiment with writers to assess how AI generated ideas affected short story writing. Their findings illustrate a very interesting nuance dynamic. Writers giving suggestions from a language model, from AI, produce stories rated more creative, better written, and more enjoyable on average, especially those writers who were less experienced or skilled. Yes? So this suggests that an AI can function as a creativity catalyst or support system, elevating individual performance. However, the same study found a trade-off. The AI-assisted stories tend to be more homogeneous, sharing more similarities, which are because of a lack of human experience. First, poet can ask, "Is my poem okay?" "Oh yes, but you have to change the end." It's strange. So, but after the change, it is less original. Yes. So there is a danger of something homogeneous. Yes. So in other words, while each AI story improving quality, collectively they showed reduced novelty or originality. As I could remember that novelty, originality is the basic requirement for creativity. Yes. So the evidence underscores a competition in AI creativity research, augmentation versus uniformity, and highlights why some view AI as double-edged sword in a creative process. So more skilled, but less original. There is a real danger, yes? A growing body of research frames in not as autonomous artists, but a collective tool that works in tandem with human creativity. We can call it augmented creativity, where human intuition, human feelings, human experience, emotional insight are combined with AI generative capacities. Yes, so the same story was architecture, that a system can support the work of architect, not replace them. Please, let's go further. Yes, the next. So this perspective from the literature suggests that AI's role in creativity can be framed as extending human capabilities, but rapidly generated ideas, prototypes, variation, while leaving final judgment and aesthetic direction to the human creating. So the end is judgment of creator. This is a fundamental issue. Yes, notably having the most advantage lacks human contextual understanding, cultural background, eventually experience. That's is very important in AI, human AI collaboration that could make our ideas more fluent, some technical skills more advanced, but the creative, the most important creative ideas belong to human. Please next. I will show you some practical examples. For instance, in visual arts, in many artistic disciplines, AI has proven to be a powerful tool for enhancing and accelerating the creative process. For instance, visual arts. Painters and digital artists now use generative AI tools to brainstorm concepts, generate reference imagery, or even co-create entire art forms. Tools, for instance, Dale. I like very much Dale. Very good system, yes, because I also interested in painting. And Midjourney as well, quite good. And they can transform text prompt. So transform your ideas. This is so-called prompting. They transform your ideas into a ready visual output. And you could change it. Of course, you could, afterwards, you can make it by your hands, painting, but you have a lot of possible alternatives. Yes, so your work will be more fluent, let's say. Yes, you can change into music. The same in music. Music and sound art have similarly benefited from AI-driven innovation. There are a lot of very interesting tools. For Suno is very good, very interesting tools. Also the same idea, the prompting, yes? Musicians employ AI tools to generate melodies, harmonies, or entire instrumental accompaniments, jump-starting the composition process. A system like, for instance, OpenAI's MuseNet, and also quite powerful tool, can of course instead of classical or contemporary composers, giving generally the songwriters or poets or musicians a palette of ideas to build up. So you have a great possibility. Remember that the work of creator is the work based of option. If you have a lot of option, you can choose the best. Yes, and here you have some tool to give a great possibility of option and choose the best, but you are to choose. Yes, you are creative. Sometimes you use the term democratize creativity. It means that it's not necessary to finish, let's say, high school of composition. Yes, or piano playing. You could compose without a very long time, for instance, school of piano playing. And that's what is important is ideas, not technical skills, ideas. We can call it democratization of art. In this way, theoretically, everybody could be an artist. But of course, not so much everybody. It depends on your soul. of your creativity. Not skills, but creativity matters, please. The same is in literature on filmmaking. Also, as role as catalysts emerging in scriptwriting, content development, there is some methods of generate plot. For instance, you have some basic plot. For instance, in book writing, basic idea, but you know, the basic idea is not enough, because you have to catch attention of client, yes, of somebody who reads it, and this system could make some specification of plot, the plot which be really interested. There is a lot of literature, but beginning from Aristotle, yes, poetry, poetic of Aristotle. For instance, still used in filmmakers, the poetry of Aristotle. So the basic idea is how to make that strong plot, and this system could help you in this way. You can change. Another issue which is very important is challenges to the intellectual property, authorship, the ownership. Generally, the most advanced process is in the United States. And of course, the law in Europe, in China, is a little bit different in Britain and France, Poland. But the beginning was the decision of High Court in the United States that purely AI-generated work is not eligible for copyright protection. So if your work was based only of AI, you are not an owner, but AI also is not an owner, because AI couldn't be an owner because it is not human. But if your work is based only on AI, you are also not an owner. It belongs to public domain. You cannot make money on it, for instance. So, what is the solution? The next one is, if you argue that you are a human user who develops only the AI guidance, you use AI as a tool, you could be an owner. Yes, and this time is AI is like, for instance, photo. Because, for instance, photography was a great challenge in 19th century for painting. Some people, oh, this is the end of painting because it's, you can make photo. Well, they're the same. You use AI like camera. Something would help you, yes? Like camera help you to make some visual effects, yes? If you argue that it's only a help, so you were an owner, legal owner. You can change. Also, there are some ethical, cultural, accountability consideration. They are very important. Yes, it is not. I think it is more complex even than the legal. Legal solution require, beginning from this decision of American High Court, is quite clear. But there are some ethical, cultural, and accountability consideration. For instance, if it is something bad in this presentation, in this art or book, who is to blame? Is the author or AI? Of course, that's the author. But sometimes it's quite difficult. Also, the problem of training, because, as you know, that artificial intelligence is trained by books. And some writers, no, they use my books and the training tools. They have to pay me for it. No. Also, American record said that this is the same way for artificial intelligence as our education for us. So I use, for instance, the book of Aristotle, poetry of Shakespeare, and I'm not obliged to pay the family of Shakespeare because I was trained on Shakespeare. Yeah, so the same. So artificial intelligence could be trained by book, by art, and without necessarily paying the authors for it. So next, I'm going to the end slowly. So the most important is to see for AI as support mechanism to amplify human creativity. So human AI collaboration, of course, is not so easy. Yes, if you want to use the help of AI, you have to learn how to do it. You have to know the programs and how to use these programs. Yes, I will come to end slowly. So there are two possible narratives. There's optimist narrative. The AI as a powerful ally to human creativity, augmenting our imagination, proactivity. It helps writers overcome blocks. Yes, many writers or musicians, they have some emotional blocks, and this system could overcome it. Yes. And what is very important, it enables artists to realize their vision beyond their technical skill. So you can write a beautiful piano sonata without necessarily being very good pianist. Will play it without you, but the idea is yours. The next, no, the next, please. Oh, the question, sorry, so the question in the narrative. Okay, this is second, we have to take into consideration. AI is possible disruptor force. In the question, maybe it could supplant some human characters. I don't think it is real danger. Because I never will be the same as human without human feeling and human understanding, human experience. But let's say it could be a little bit dangerous for some, maybe not for composers, but rather for piano players. Yeah, so. But I think there still will be composition for real pianists. They will be still important. But maybe, for instance, music for the film could be made with AI. And they can lose some, the pianists or the artists can lose some money because of it. Yes, it's possible. So there is some danger, yes, but more are you creative, you are less independent. You are not threatened by artificial intelligence because most artistic creativity is based on human experience. So please next. So it's very important that balance and governance, yes? We must strive for a human-centric of integration of AI for the arts. So it means establishing legal guardrails. So for instance, how we can use the AI being still the author. We call it human-centric integration. The next, please. And in conclusion, the story of human creativity is still being written. It's something very, very new. So at this juncture, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to shape this story. Yes. So the dual role of AI as a support and threat need not remain intention. with prudent action, the support can be amplified and these threats might activate. So human creativity is quite a resilient force, which survived, for instance, such a innovation like camera or computer. So it didn't kill the creativity. The same will be with AI. We didn't won't kill the creativity, but I hope will be very helpful. In fact, it will rather enlarge our human creativity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrzej, for this very interesting presentation. I was a little bit over 20 minutes, no problem. I'll try to speak a little faster so we still have enough time for Q&A. Let me share my presentation and make sure that everybody can see it. Can everybody see my presentation? Yeah? Everybody can see it? Okay, that's great. Very good. So what I'll just do is start, well, originally it was 20 minutes, but I'll try to be a little bit shorter. The title of my presentation is Humanizing Language Education in the Gen AI Age, a Critical Realist Approach. This is the title of an upcoming book to be published in the Routledge Studies in Critical Realism series. I don't know, maybe at the end of this year or maybe early next year. The main focus of the book is the intensifying presence and influence of generative artificial intelligence. I'm going to say Gen AI from now on, in language education in the context of English for academic purposes and written composition within university level English as a foreign language programs. Now, this was the original plan of my presentation, to talk about the book, basically, all the things that I talk about in the book. But upon greater reflection, I realized that there's just too much to talk about, and that not all of this is interesting probably to my audience. So I've decided to choose a specific topic from chapter 6, which is about humanism from a relational perspective. I just want to put in parentheses that in the book, I kind of explore a little bit the possibility for critical realism to be a humanist perspective, something that is not always explicitly discussed in critical realist literature, I believe. So in chapter 6, I explore the question of Gen AI, whether Gen AI is an agent or not. So that will be the sort of the more targeted content of today's presentation. Why is this important to talk about this question? Well, firstly, it is the idea that Gen AI is an agent is both explicitly and implicitly communicated in the literature. Gen AI is widely described as an autonomous machine, as intelligent, able to learn, and of course hallucinate. It is also commonly depicted in Gen AI and education scholarship as an interlocutor, an interactant, a friend, a Socratic discourse participant, a tutor, a teacher, and so forth. All of these labels imply the existence of, well, most of them come from the impression that because Gen AI is able to produce language, then there must be some kind of psychological activities operating within AI. Of course, this is still at the metaphorical level, but there are anthropomorphizing tendencies in the research. And I think the argument that I'm going to make in this presentation is that this offers a conduit through which we can, some researchers identify Gen AI as an agent. Mark Carrigan, in his very interesting book, although not entirely unproblematic book, I think the title is Generative Artificial Intelligence for Academics. It's recently published. I recommend everybody to purchase this book. He repeats quite often, Gen AI should be used as an interlocutor rather than a substitute for thought. And I think in the presentation by Andrzej just earlier, we had a sort of like a parallel to this idea that generative AI should offer support to artists as opposed to kind of replace them in the production of art. The underlying assumptions, of course, the more general underlying assumption is that if generative AI can affect other things in the world and do things somewhat beyond the controls of its human creators and users, it must therefore be an agent. But I also remind everybody that the fact that generative AI seems to be able to produce language constitutes a very powerful encouragement for people to think of generative AI as an agent. This is something that we do as human beings when we see non-human entities communicating. We then sort of have a tendency to anthropomorphize them. This is a well-documented process. Torrance, about 12 years ago, argued that it is possible to produce artificial agents that are not merely operationally autonomous, but have characteristics of being ethically autonomous as well. It should be possible in principle for artificial computational agents to exemplify forms of emotions and consciousness. So obviously, all of these things imply agency. Crompton quite recently said that Gen AI is a knowledgeable entity capable of actively shaping itself in the outside world, making it a synthetic agent. So we have then sort of a more refined categorization of what we mean by agency. This time it's synthetic agency, and similar to its human users and interacting in human affairs. Martinez D talks similarly about Gen AI as an algorithmic agent capable of exerting non-human synthetic agency to produce emergent outcomes. And she also talks about Gen AI having sort of like the equivalent of will or volition. And Nguyen et al. In the field of language education talk about a human AI collaboration in academic writing and higher education. And this idea of AI being a collaborator with a human is quite prominent in the literature. And again, it implies the idea that if you have two entities collaborating, then they're both agents, they're both capable of contributing agentively to a project. Krakowski quite recently said that the use of Gen AI by people produces an interactive compound or a human Gen AI hybrid or conjoined agency. So this whole idea of Gen AI being an agent is actually quite alive in the literature. My point is that I'm not convinced that Gen AI is an agent, and I will draw extensively from Margaret Archer's book, Being Agent, and also Pier Paolo Donati and Archer's book on in 2015 titled The Relational Agent, to make the points that I don't think they are agents. Now, I don't think every critical realist thinkers will agree with me, but this is how I see things. First of all, the idea that technologies affect worldly events and produce definite outcomes, to me, is not a sufficient criterion for qualify something as an agent. Pretty much all technologies have similar effects. Unlike human beings, Gen AI cannot avoid responding to prompts from human users. For example, it cannot tell me, my apologies, Jeremy, but if you don't mind, I'd like to skip that question from you because it makes me feel somewhat uncomfortable. The very fact that Gen AI cannot do that, to me, is a very clear sign that it doesn't have necessarily what we might understand as will or volition. It operates on deterministic terms. And as we all know, I think this is sort of like a commonsensical among all of us here, that Gen AI does not operate in the world as people do. Gen AI has a different kind of embodied experience, leading to different kinds of properties and powers. It cannot share relationality, intent, emotionality, understanding or misunderstandings of meanings, ethical engagements, and so forth. And I quite like this quote by Perifanu and Economides, who say that Gen AI systems do not possess understanding, consciousness, or agency. They generate outputs based on pattern extracted from vast amounts of data, but they do not understand or experience the content they produce. To me, those are consequential absences in the Bashkarian terminology there. Another reason why I don't think Gen AI are agents is that, and I think this is the main reason, Gen AI is a physically complex system. It functions deterministically, even if very complex and very difficult to map all the processes, whereas people are both, sorry, they're both physically and socially complex. And this comes from Donati and Archer. Consequently, it is impossible to identify all the relevant conditions under which people think and do things, why people have more or less freedoms to act according to their own volition, and how they justify according to norms or ethics and provide reasons for their actions, for example. Gen AI, in my opinion, cannot be considered authors of the text they produce because they cannot demonstrate ethical commitment to the truth claims included in these texts. They are incapable of, in other words, judgmental rationality. Two other applied linguistic scholars made a very similar argument. I did not include their quote here, but they said that basically Gen AI is incapable of judgmental rationality and is sort of locked into kind of a Baudrillard type, sort of like a simulacra, and keep reproducing things that are already available. Gen AI does not meet the criteria for agency or personhood, according to what I believe Archer is saying. These criteria include a first-person perspective, reflexive capacity, which would allow an agent to discern, deliberate, and dedicate oneself to a project, and cannot formulate self-articulated concerns. Unlike human beings who are agents, generative AI does not have a continuous sense of self, which means that it doesn't have the core property, the core condition from which to be socialized. It cannot recognize social roles or associated responsibilities, and therefore cannot perform social role incumbency. So it cannot be a tutor or a teacher or something like that. Why do we persist in labeling Gen AI as an agent? Partly, one of the reasons is that it's because of a failure to uphold a crucial distinction between determinism and volition. And we still have some critical realist scholars who do not bring this to the fore, and I think this is a little bit unfortunate. So determinism, for example, Gen AI processing algorithms according to predetermined rules and causes. Volition, for example, humans thinking and acting in the world as a result of complex, nonlinear interaction between multiple generative mechanisms, including their own reflexive, rational, emotional, and ethical drives. David Scott, the educational scholar, said that if we understand the mind as a volitional learning instrument, and I don't think anybody can really disagree with that idea, then it is reasonable to suggest that artificial intelligence will never, and indeed cannot, have or acquire every capacity of the human mind. And to me, I include agency in that particular as an example of such capacity. Another example, which I find a little bit unfortunate, is the seeming tendency since the emergence of Gen AI, a tendency even amongst some critical realists to sort of adhere to actor network theory, a particular philosophical perspective which has been quite extensively criticized within critical realist circles like maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. Particularly appealing is the notion of actant, not agent, but actants. Actant means anything which makes a difference within a network, for example, a society, can be deemed an agent, an actor, or an actant. So this basically suggests that computer systems in a hospital, for example, are just as much agents as doctors and nurses who are working in that hospital. Conceptual problems here, of course, is that the concept of actant does not add anything of substance, in my opinion, to what we already know as causal potential. Things do have effects on other things in the world without necessarily being agents endowed with volition. I just provide two examples here, and I draw this from the work of Doug Porpora. Let's imagine, for example, walls' capacity to constrain people's movements within rooms. Well, we cannot equate that particular power, as we call an affordance, with people's ability to leave the room and go for a walk in the park, for example. Actor network theory sort of blurs those distinctions. Similarly, scholars' ability to communicate meaning and research ideas and push ideas, transform ideas through academic writing cannot be equated with ChatGPT's capacity to suggest possible phrasing or provide possible sources through an analysis of algorithms. Those are very different kinds of mechanisms involved. And this is what Porpora is essentially saying here, that we're talking about very different kinds of mechanisms, and those differences need to be accounted for, which the actor network theory concept of actant seems to elide, unfortunately. Another problem is the tendency to anthropomorphize non-human entities. This is, I mean, this has a very long history. This is sort of like part of our ways of thinking about the world, I suppose. Waits et al. Talk about 3 reasons why people anthropomorphize non-human entities. The first one is basically just looking at parallels. And I mentioned earlier that a lot of people seem to think that because ChatGPT is able to produce language, then some kind of psychology must be hiding behind this. Some kind of reflexive engagement must be hiding behind this. The other reason is sort of like if we can imagine, like, for example, the Disney movies where lions talk and have, you know, personalities like human beings and so forth. It's a tendency to simplify non-human entities, making them relatable and ultimately gain control over them. The third reason is lacking human contact. Then some people might want to anthropomorphize technology, for example, so as to create a connection with other people, other entities, not people. Brugger talks at length about this tendency in the context of Gen AI research, and he says that basically this is due to a fundamental misunderstanding of embodiment. And I talked about embodiment a little bit earlier before, but he also talks about the sort of like the specter of positive, I should say the resilience of positivism in Gen AI research. He actually says that discussions about artificial general intelligence, or AGI, I think we all know what this is, I won't explain that. He argues that those are inherently flawed because they're rooted in a positivist understanding of human reasons, which follow historically from Descartes' belief that the essence of the human being lies in the capacity for reason. I wouldn't go even as far as to say that it's not even reason. Gen AI is not even able to perform reason. It's just analyzing algorithms. That's not necessarily what reason is about. But Brugger makes a very important point, saying that the essence of goal seeking for all natural agents, as for humans, lies in desires and feelings, that is, valuation and motivation rather than reason. We also see similar conclusions in the works of Archer, Donati, and of course Andrew Sayers. There's another reason which Andrea Maccarini, who gave the plenary talk earlier today, I think he gives sort of like a reason, a much broader reason for all of this, which, you know, it's not just, you know, researchers talking about generative AI, but it's human beings thinking about generative AI in society. It's a much more broader cultural phenomenon. He talks about post-human sociality, which he defines as the emergent phenomenon of relations and networks in which humans and non-humans entities are involved together as relationship partners. And he also makes, I think, the argument, so, I mean, again, coming back, why do we anthropomorphize technology and non-human entities? The goal, according to Maccarini, is to produce docile, obedient, and controllable robots in Gen AI software entirely responsible to human demands, a pursuit which he deems paradoxically framed as aiming to humanize or enhance the human experience. But in his argument, it's actually a dehumanizing process. According to Maccarini, post-human sociality makes the other technically predictable, tame, trustworthy, and loyal to the human consumer. It prioritizes the search for the ever brighter and more interesting other, according to one's desires. It introduces an unhealthy notion of perfection within sociality and relationality, therefore not allowing humans to appreciate the imperfect other. And it introduces the equally unhealthy notion of reversible, resettable, or dispensable relationships. So, in other words, again, you know, post-human sociality, it's sort of like tends to commodify relations. There's a commodification of relationships, and it's rooted in a profoundly dehumanizing mode of thinking. And this particular theme is quite salient in my book, which is set to come out pretty soon. So here are my concluding remarks. I mean, one of the things that sort of is, I think, very appealing to scholars, including critical realist scholars, is the notion that there are different kinds of agency. Agency, and this is not my opinion, but seems to be a pretty broadly accepted idea, that agency is not just something that humans possess, that there are different kinds of agency, and that we should not be anthropocentric, and we should appreciate different ways humans and non-human entities have effects on the world. I mean, that's very appealing at one level, but I think that in starting to think like that, we should really be careful about denying the ontological differences between agency, affordances, and causal potentials. I think those are very different mechanisms. Those are very different things. And agency, in my opinion, is quite different from the kind of deterministic sort of processes which control generative AI technology. Volkoff and Strong say that define an affordance as what is offered, provided, or furnished to someone or something by an object. Depending on the technological artifact, we have vastly different kinds of affordances and different levels of complexities, but we're still talking about affordances, in my opinion. Affordances exist in potentia, whether or not they are actualized. Agency is commonly defined, and this is outside critical realism, is commonly defined as the socio-culturally mediated capacity to act. I don't like single definitions of agency, but this is a pretty good one in my opinion. And if agency is socio-culturally mediated, then embodiment, relationality, reflexivity, and emotionality are necessarily involved. And I take something from Maccarini's presentation earlier today regarding reflexivity. It's worth citing Archer's quote saying that maintaining the ultimate concerns arrived at the end of an internal dialogue requires cultivation. Generative AI is excluding from all these processes, in my opinion. Agency is more than the capacity for an entity to affect other entities. This is better to be called causal potential. It involves specific kinds of emergent powers resulting from both physical and social emergence, which allows humans to transcend the deterministic realm restraining Gen AI technology to acquire capacities such as volition, reflexivity, relationality, emotionality, and ethical judgments. I will stop there, but I do want to say the last point, that when researching the Gen AI people interaction, which is essentially what we're doing when we're talking about generative AI, we need to maintain an ontologically layered viewpoint cognizant of different types of complex and emergent processes, one which successfully upholds the crucial differences between determinism and volition, and, as I argued, between affordances, causal potentials, and agency. So these are the references. I can share my slide if you're interested. This is pretty much all there is. Was that okay? Did I do a good job, or was this? I just raced through the thing. Can anybody give me feedback? Did you see my slide, by the way?
Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
Presentation.
Thank you very much. So as the mediator, I will now yield the floor to everybody. Shall we start with Vincent's presentation? Does anybody have any questions regarding Vincent's presentation? Brendan, I think you have a question. You want to go ahead?
Not quite sure who's Brendan is, but if you have a question, whoever.
Can you speak loudly, Brendan? I think your mic is off. You need to unmute yourself, yeah? It's probably top right.
I can speak here, but I think he's speaking. Okay, so I'm not sure. I'm not Brendan, but if there's a Brendan online who wants to ask a question, I'll wait for this to be working. To everybody who spoke, thank you very much for all of your presentations. They were just great. As someone that works on AI from a critical realist lens myself, just thoroughly enjoyed it. So the first question was actually inspired by Vincent's presentation, but I actually invite Jeremy and Andre to answer it if they like. Because when Vincent was talking about the black box problem of algorithms, I was just thinking about how black box are often framed as an epistemological problem around the limitations as to what we can know about the functionality of these systems in the moment. But then in the critical realist sense, where we're always grounding everything in the question of absence and the transcendentally necessary conditions for things to happen as they do, I was thinking in the presentation about the black box actually is an ontological necessity for engaging with the wider critical realist problematic. So for example, the algorithms themselves in an AI system would be expressive of real conditions, say the data set, or different aspects of the neural network, like the embeddings or the weightings that exist within it. So I just wanted to ask to Vincent and to the other panelists whether they had any thoughts on this notion of the black box and absence to, yeah, just demonstrate the utility of critical realism to approaching these complex issues.
I think Vincent would be more equipped for answering this question.
Well, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure if I understood the question properly. If it is from what I understand, I mean, I think black box is often a form of pretext. So I don't know if it answers your question. There are things that are difficult to uncover. You know, our brain is a form of black box because we don't know and do not understand everything going on in there. But that concept of black box has been used for things where we know that there are some Homo sapiens actively coding things, and my presentation this morning was a good example of that. And I was really shocked in the media when people were talking about like our life being governed by algorithms, and that's partly true. I mean, that's true if you go to I don't know, a dating app, but some of them are maybe out of control if you want. But you know, the one they were talking about was absolutely not that. And there is that exchange between the technical reality where things are absolutely not a black box in that example, and the perception in the population. So I don't know where I'm going with that, and if it answers anyway your question. But Jeremy, you may have something to say about that.
Well, actually, about the black box, I can't say much, but what I do, one thing that I do keep coming back to is the proliferation of metaphors in describing generative AI, possibly because we haven't really developed a kind of vocabulary to understand what this thing is. I do think that we look at AI very much from sort of anthropomorphizing points of views, and that's fair. And it's not like it's, how can I say, it's probably a stage in our evolving understandings of AI, but I think we do need to develop a better sort of terms, and I think we need to also uphold. We need to come back to ontology, ontological questions, and I think that so, for example, ontological questions would have to do, for example, with accounting for absences. What is an absence? And what kind of causal influence does an absence have? For example, what AI is unable to do, for example, the type of embodied experience that it has versus the kind of embodied experience humans have, and how understanding those ontological issues, how can we then understand the Gen AI human interaction? I think those are all ontological questions, and we need to sort of like learn to get out of this sort of like metaphorical sort of tendencies that we have. I say this because I read generative AI in education, language education literature. This is a very narrow area. I don't study law. I don't study health science. I don't know how it's talked about in other fields necessarily. I can only comment on the body of work that I'm reading on the subject. And this is one thing I can say, that from a critical realist perspective, it really comes down to, you know, constantly reminding ourselves of what is the ontology of the things that we are trying to study here. I don't think that fully answers your question, but I hope that it sort of elucidates a few. Any other questions? I can't see anybody in the room, by the way.
I have a question, if it's possible. The question and comments to the fantastic presentation, Professor Jérôme Bouchard. Congratulations for your beautiful presentation. And I have only one comment, maybe helpful in distinguish intelligence and an agency, differences between intelligence and wisdom. Because if we are talking about intelligence, we are talking only about intelligence, not about human person or humanity or wisdom especially. Very simple, difficult but simple differences between intelligence and wisdom. Why the wisdom is not only intelligence? And if we analyze this problem on different levels, emotional, axiological, and so on, all the differences are much more clear. And all the differences are actually important in our understanding, not only what the human agent is, but what the human person is. And we can find much more arguments for your argumentation if we analyze those differences in much more sophisticated way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. I really appreciate it. This presentation was a truncated argument, very truncated argument of the arguments that I'm developing in the book. There's other aspects that I'm talking about. And I do agree with you that intelligence and wisdoms are very different things. But I will add that there's different types of intelligence, that intelligence is not just data processing, problem solving ideas, of course. But yeah, definitely when we start talking about agency, what is an agent? What are the powers of an agent? When we think, for example, of Margaret Archer's pretty clear definition of agency as people's ability to perceive, understand cultural, structural, and material constraints and enablements in light of their ultimate concerns and aspirations. When we think about this definition itself, then of course, not just intelligence matters, but wisdom and all kinds of stuff. And I would add relationality. I didn't talk about relationality at all in this presentation, but I think that all of these things, even cognition to a very large extent, is contingent on the pre-existence, on the possibility of relationality, of people being in relation to other beings, to be able to use their cognitive forces. So thank you very much for your comment. Anybody else has a question?
Yes, I'd like to just make an observation to Vincent. It's interesting that the focus of your research involves an examination of the coding of the algorithms. I would have thought that you could assume that many of the systems that we find in organizations reflect the priorities and imperatives of senior management, and the resulting systems incorporate the priorities and imperatives in various decision processes, which are then subsequently coded. You don't need necessarily to examine at the code level, the software coding, to understand the design imperatives and the design features of a system. That is part of the process of systems design. So unless we think that these systems have become autonomous and make decisions totally independently of management's concerns, I think the fruitful thing to do is to remember the institutional context of these systems and how they're shaped by the imperatives of that institution's managerial elite, for want of a better word.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I agree with you. I mean, what I was trying to say with that is like, you know, like the code is closer to the form of reality being generated by the system, which means that you know, if you rely only, for example, in political educations, if you listen to the Ministry of Education, they may say something that is not encoded as they say it is in the actual algorithm. And what I was trying to say is that when you have a look at the code, it does reflect, you know, like whether, you know, the statements are true or untrue, and it does reflect what is being generated in the reality, because it is in my example, the algorithm is the materiality of the acceptance of people in institutions for higher education. So it is part of the system, and it is being produced by it, and it's not something like independent. I mean, I don't see it that way for now.
Forgive me, please, but I must announce that at first time, 1:00 p.m., we are going to lunch. We invite our guests by internet too, but only by internet, unfortunately. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Brendan, I think you had a question, but before, since you asked one, I think Rick should have precedence. Maybe Rick, if you could ask your question first.
Yeah, two things. One is a bit of a plug. I've put it in the chat, but in terms of anthropomorphizing AI, where we saw classic examples of that in the second presentation, there are free images available at Better Images of AI, which perhaps better represent what AI is. And that brings me on to the ontological question of what AI is, which I think is really important, and we've had some discussion of that. A few things to think about. One, LLMs aren't really deterministic, they're probabilistic. They have noise built in deliberately. They're changing rapidly, growing, developing, however you want to talk it. They're interacting with one another. Agental AI is the big thing at the moment. So in a sense, these LLMs are interacting with the digital world in the way that humans do. Increasingly, they will become embodied in robots and what have you, will interact with the world. So I think ontologically, it's both really difficult to conceptualize them now. I agree they're not agents, but I'm not sure what they are. Maybe synthetic agents does work. And, you know, how does it relate to the ontology of critical realism, of culture, structure, agency? How do they fit? And that's something I think is important to grapple with. I'd be very interested in any comments on that.
I would say thank you for your nuance between determinism and things being probabilistic. I understand what you're saying. But by using the term deterministic in the sense is that, and I'm just going to kind of repeat something that I've already said in the presentation, which is that although it is incredibly difficult to map out AI's movements and decision-making and data processing abilities, it is in principle possible to map out all those links, basically. It doesn't have, how can I say, like AI won't commit suicide, for example, to put it dramatically. You know, won't kill itself, for example, won't seek luxury, for example, or won't necessarily empathize with a human being or something like this, or with other needs necessarily. There's certain things that human beings are able to do because of the nature of their embodied experience with the world that AI simply is not privy to, that does not have this privilege. It's a different kind of embodiment, which leads to the emergence of different kinds of mechanisms. So we can say that it's probabilistic, but in using the term deterministic, meaning that whereas we can map out those different links in AI, we can't explain why human beings arrive at their decision all the time. We can't predict fully exactly what's going to happen with a human being. So again, and Brugger actually talks a lot about this, that, a lot of this kind of confusion and sort of the questions that we keep asking ourselves about AI, they are rooted in a misunderstanding of embodiment, basically. We really come down to the notion of embodiment. I mean, it's just something that I would like to sort of stress, I think, at this level. Okay, I think it's lunchtime. There's 2 minutes left. Maybe some people, everybody's still here. Anybody? Dave, I think you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy.
Go ahead.
I just, I wanted to say two things. First of all, this is a fantastic session. It's really, really fascinating and stimulating presentation. So thank you to all the presenters for that. And secondly, I just wanted to ask Andre a question, because this question of what happens to the copyright of things that are produced by AI is quite momentous, and I'm surprised that the AI companies aren't trying to get their claws into that. And it seems like a natural progression for the AI companies to claim a share of copyright and work that's been produced using their tools. And given that the AI companies have a huge amount of money at their disposal, and money speaks in the US legal system, is that a likely outcome, do you think?
Andre, this is a question for you if you're still in the room. Should Gen AI companies claim copyrights?
Some differences between countries, but generally the most important idea is that artificial intelligence is not a human, so it's impossible to have the property rights. Yes, if you only copy the work of your work is totally based on artificial intelligence, you are not author, both from a legal point of view, but also from ethical point of view. It is not your work. But when you use as a help, like for instance using camera, yes, or using computer, it's okay. You are author, but sometimes it's not easy to find the borders between helping and replacement, and it is a case to write, to decide. Yes, so the question is open, but the general idea is already pointed out. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anjay. This panel, I think we stopped recording, so we can say everything now. No, no limits. I'm joking. I think you guys are going to go out for lunch. Well, thank you very much for attending this panel on AI. And hopefully this area of research will be pushed, will be developed within critical realist ontology. I think we have a lot of work to do ahead, and personally, I look very much forward to upcoming papers and developments in this area. So have a nice lunch, and please enjoy the rest of the conference. Rick, you still there?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I loved your presentation.